Welcome back to the Fantasy Ball Profits. Once again, my name is Rob Scuderick. Thanks for joining me today. So this is going to be our first post-draft video. The NFL draft just took place, so we're going to take a look at that draft and how some of those picks are going to impact the fantasy football world come this fall. Now, if we're being honest, we're going to be brutally honest. I know, excited, it's fun to talk about fantasy football, but if we're being honest, it's extremely premature to talk about the draft and the impact these players are going to have. To truly begin to measure the impact these players are going to have in the fantasy world, we really need to see them get to camp, preseason. We need to begin to hear reports coming from their teams, not only about their performance, but about other players on the team around them, people that they're competing for on the depth charts. We need to get to hear reports of injuries, how guys are recovering from injuries. Things like that, because for a quarterback, the impact he's going to have off is not just how talented he is, but really the opportunity or situation he lands in is going to determine whether or not he has a productive rookie season. And so that's kind of half the battle. With that said, yes, it's a little premature to talk about these guys are drafted, the impact they're going to have in the fantasy world, but let's be honest, weather's getting warm, it's nice outside, we're all getting excited, football's right around the corner. Is it really ever too early to talk about fantasy football? I think not, so let's get into it a little bit. Now, as we look at this video, we're not projecting the career for these guys. We're talking about simply the impact they're going to have in 2018, so that's important. Talking about their dynasty value, that's a whole nother conversation. We're just going to talk about their impact going into this year. Now, the reason why we waited for the draft to be over before we begin to talk about some of these rookies and the impact we thought that they might have is, like I had said, for rookies, often it's the opportunity, not just their talent, that will determine their success. A lot of coaches in the NFL are very old school, and they're thinking if a rookie comes in, even if he's very gifted, the mentality is he needs to kind of earn his way up there. They're not just going to hand him the job. And the learning curve in the NFL for a rookie is very sharp. The game is a whole other speed for them coming out of college. They're beginning to learn the nuances of the game, the playbook, etc. And so we really kind of need to see where these guys land to determine where they're going to be and who's ahead of them on the depth chart. And what I mean by that, you need to know who's ahead of them on the depth chart. Let's take, for example, running back Barkley, who ended up with the Giants. Let's say he ended up on the Rams. Let's say they drafted him. Now, heading into the draft, we knew that's not going to happen. But just for argument's sake, let's pretend that the Rams had drafted Barkley somehow. His talent wouldn't matter because he has Gurley ahead of him. So he needed to get onto a lineup where there wasn't a lot of guys there. He didn't have an opportunity to get hold of that job. Also, the NFL draft is going to affect many aspects of the fantasy realm. There's a domino effect that takes place. There's a lot of things like offensive lines will improve because of the draft. If an offensive line improves, obviously that's going to help the quarterback play, the wide receiver play, the running back play. But we're not going to look at every player in the draft. We're simply going to look at the positions of quarterback, running back, wide receiver, and tight end, kind of the fantasy mainstay positions at this point. So that's what we're going to take a look at now. Let's look at the NFL draft, the impact that we think it's going to have early on the fantasy world. Start with the quarterbacks. Well, many experts felt like this is a very, very strong quarterback class. It was loaded with a ton of talent. You look at names like Rosen, Mayfield, Darnold, Allen, Jackson. There's a lot of talented quarterbacks. It was rich with talent there. And so people are pretty excited to see the impact these guys are going to have in the NFL. So the question is, where should these guys get drafted in comparison to the likes of Aaron Rodgers, Cousins, Winston, other quarterbacks like that? Where do these guys land in terms of their fantasy value? Well, I think one of the biggest mistakes as fantasy owners make year after year is they get caught up in the hype. Okay, we're always looking for that flavor of the week. We're looking for the next great guy, and because of it, I think our emotions get caught up in it, and we become a little bit blind. So we need to put our emotion aside, and we need to look at numbers because the numbers simply do not lie. So here's what we'd say regarding drafting a rookie quarterback and where they're going to fall in their fantasy impact. Rookie quarterbacks that are pure pocket passers don't make a significant impact the rookie year. They just simply don't. Okay, let me get to the numbers. Listen to the numbers we're going to begin to share with you. So Sports Illustrated did a recent article, and they give a list of the top 10 greatest rookie quarterback seasons of all time. So they list the top 10 greatest rookie quarterbacks of all time, that's the rookie seasons. Now, what you're going to notice with the list is a lot of these names are newer quarterbacks. You're not going to hear a lot like Y.E. Tittle, guys going all the way back. And the reason why a lot of these names are newer and not older is because for many, many years in the NFL, there was a real mentality that rookie quarterbacks simply don't start in the NFL. You draft a rookie quarterback, he gets mentored for a year or two by a veteran, then he moves into that role. It's just very recent that starting quarterbacks have been rookies, where teams have kind of allowed them a little bit more rope there, give them a little opportunity to learn on the job. That's a more recent trend. So here's Sports Illustrated top 10 rookie quarterback season. We'll start with number 10. Number 10, they had Peyton Manning. Now here's his rookie year. That year he finished with 3,739 yards, 26 TDs. Pretty good, right? But he had 28 interceptions. Had a little rough year there in terms of interceptions. Number 9 on the list was Jameis Winston. Finished 4,042 yards, 22 passing TDs, and 15 interceptions. He had 213 rushing yards and 6 rushing TDs, so that was pretty good. Number 8 on the list was Andy Dalton. He had 3,398 yards, 20 TDs, 13 interceptions, and finished with 1 rushing touchdown. Number 7 was Andrew Luck on the list. Had 4,374 yards, 23 TD passes, 18 interceptions, and he finished with 5 rushing touchdowns, which those 5 rushing touchdowns are pretty solid. That gave him a decent year. All those interceptions were high. Let's look at Matt Ryan. Matt Ryan was number 6 on their list. He ended up with 3,440 yards, 16 TDs, 11 interceptions, and 1 rushing touchdown. Number 5 on the list was Dan Marino. He's probably the oldest one. He is the oldest one actually on this list. After his rookie year, he had 2,210 yards, 20 touchdown passes, only 6 interceptions. He ended up with 2 rushing touchdowns. He had a good year, but his yardage totals were very low that year. And you have Russell Wilson. He's number 4 on Sports Illustrated list there. In his rookie year, he had 3,118 yards, 26 touchdowns passing, only 10 interceptions. He had 489 rushing yards and 4 rushing TDs. Number 3 on their list was Cam Newton. Cam Newton ended up his rookie year with 4,051 yards, 21 touchdown passes, 17 interceptions, but he had 706 rushing yards and 14 rushing touchdowns. He killed it that year in terms of rushing touchdowns. Number 3 on the list was Robert Griffin. Robert Griffin had 3,200 passing yards. He had 20 touchdown passes, only 5 interceptions. He had 815 rushing yards and 7 TDs. Now, number 1 on the list for Sports Illustrated was Ben Roethlisberger, and it's kind of surprising because his numbers weren't that great. He only finished with 2,621 passing yards, 17 passing TDs, and 11 interceptions. He only had 1 rushing touchdown. So his numbers, he had a good year, a solid year, but the reason why he's number 1 is that year he started 13-0, and the Steelers made it to the AFC Championship game, so that's why he was number 1 on that list. So if you take a look at the numbers of those guys, what they did their rookie years, and those are some big names on there. You're looking at Peyton Manning up there and Dan Marino and others. Only 4 quarterbacks, if you look at their numbers, would be start-worthy in terms of fantasy football statistically. Okay. If you look at all the other guys and their stats, it would really put them in the bottom half of the league in terms of stats for fantasy. So now are we to assume after generation of quarterbacks that just haven't had huge impactful years in the NFL that suddenly this group of quarterbacks is just going to blow it out of the water and be great? I find that hard to believe. I think the numbers don't lie. I think we have to stick with the statistics. Now, if you take a look at Manning and Luck on the list, now Manning and Luck had decent years as quarterbacks, but if you're in a league that minuses for interceptions, they were well below average. So that really, once again, leaves about 4 quarterbacks on that list that had decent years, albeit not great seasons, but seasons that you could have probably started them in your fantasy league and done it pretty well with. But if you look at those 4 quarterbacks, what you're going to find, there's a pattern between all 4 of them. And these are the 4 guys on that list that had decent seasons as rookies that you could have started in fantasy. And they were Russell Wilson, Cam Newton, Jameis Winston, and Robert Griffin. The common trend between all of them is their running quarterbacks. It was their legs and rushing touchdowns that saved their seasons. If you take a look at Cam Newton, had 14 rushing touchdowns. Griffin had 7. Winston 6, and Wilson actually had an all-around good year. He finished with 26 touchdown passes, only 10 interceptions, and 4 rushing touchdowns. A lot of those guys had low yardage totals, and that's typically because rookie quarterbacks, their offensive coordinators will play conservatively in terms of play calling. Now, right now, some of you out there are thinking, wait a second, there's a guy that we didn't talk about, and that's Deshaun Watson of last year. Undoubtedly, Deshaun Watson had a great year. First of all, there's a few things we need to consider with Deshaun Watson. One, his year started later. He didn't get to start at the beginning of the year. And his season got cut short because of injuries. Now, if you look at some of his numbers and you extrapolate that over 16 games, the guy was being phenomenal. But I think it's safe to assume that defenses and defensive coordinators, once they saw some more game film and had a chance to learn kind of how he play, his style of play, they would have adjusted and some of those numbers went down. Not saying he's not a great quarterback. I think he'll be very good. I also think it's important to remember with Watson that his coach was hesitant to start him. Even as a rookie, even with all of his talent, the only reason why he had the opportunity to move into that starting role is the horrible play of Tom Savage and Yates that moved him into that role. And then the final thing with Watson is it really just reinforces the point that we're making, which is simply that it's running quarterbacks that had the quickest impact in the NFL. Now, that's not to say that a pocket passing quarterback won't be great, but typically we're seeing them, how they mature and the impact they have is typically after their rookie season. So here's what happens. People get so excited with these new rookies that get drafted. You think about Watson last year, and we get so emotional that we become like the gambler If you've ever been around some gamblers or some addicts, you know this is how they are. The gambler, he remembers that time that he hit it big in casino, but he forgets all the other losses that he has. And so let's not let that one time, the exception to the rule, blind us when it comes to this. Now, if you feel compelled to look at rookie quarterbacks this year that might have an impact, okay, based on historical numbers, the trends that we have seen and what we have looked at, the one quarterback then to watch, the one who has the ability to run the ball and have an immediate impact would be Lamar Jackson. Okay, based on all the stats, all the numbers, everything that we have seen, he would be the guy. When we break that trend down statistically, he's the one to watch, and he's the one that could have an impact. Now, concern I have is you have Joe Flacco there, who is an established starter. It's not likely that the Ravens are just going to hand that offense over to Lamar Jackson, even though he's very talented, because the Ravens had a good year last year, and I think they feel like they can compete and make it to the postseason and cause some damage. I'm not a Flacco fan. In fact, I believe that he's got maybe one more year, and this will be Jackson's team. So if the Ravens struggle, Jackson could move into that role. If you look at Lamar Jackson in college, he was the best rushing quarterback coming out of college, hands down, not even close. In fact, in college, he rushed for 4,132 yards and 50 rushing TDs. Personally, for me, I'm not going to draft a rookie quarterback. I'm just not going to do it. I never have. I want to play close to the vest. Yes, every once in a blue moon, I miss on the diamond and the rough. But if you look at the numbers, you're best to stay away from rookie quarterbacks. Just don't do it. What I might suggest is if you like some of these guys out there, some of these guys are very talented, they're in good situations, maybe watch them as they progress the year. If you're in a dynasty league late in the season, you could grab this guy, stash him on your bench, keep him for 2019. But I'm really not going to advise that either, because that really goes against our philosophy here at FFP, which is this. Don't draft quarterbacks early. There's a lot out there. Load up your bench with running backs, wide receivers, other positions like that. And in keeper leagues, we say never keep a quarterback. We always say, unless you have to, we tell you to keep other positions. So that would be my advice. I'm not going to break down all of the specific quarterbacks because, quite honestly, I don't think you should be looking at a rookie quarterback in fantasy. That's just my take. Now, I could be wrong. Love to hear your comments. But when it's all said and done, we're just going to have to wait and see how it plays out in the end. And if I'm wrong, I want to hear it at the end of the season. But if I'm right, give me a shout out and acknowledge that. Let's take a look at the running backs. Okay. So when we look at running backs in the NFL, the impact they can have not only in the NFL but in fantasy is a lot more immediate. The learning curve is shorter for the running back. These are guys that can come in almost immediately have an impact. You look at Todd Gurley a couple years ago. So many other running backs that came in the league initially and just had huge years. So this is the one position that you can look towards and immediately find yourself a bona fide star and a starter in the fantasy realm. Let's look at a few of the running backs. I'll tell you my thoughts on those. Now, once again, I'm just going to break a few of these down, but really we're gonna make another film. We're going to make another video as we get closer to the draft. I'll talk about a lot of these same things, but at that point, we're going to start to have more information coming in. We can better evaluate these guys and how they're doing. But the number one running back I got to talk about there is Barkley, drafted by the New York Giants. Barkley out of Penn State, 5'11", 230 pounds. I love this guy. He's a stud. There are no deficiencies in his game. He is a true three-down back. And in many fantasy leagues, he can get drafted in the second round. And in some bigger leagues, I guarantee you, mark my words, he will actually sneak into the first round. If you're in a 12-team league or bigger, there'll be some of those leagues where he'll sneak into the first round. Usually I play close to the vest, so he's probably not a guy I'd take in the first round, but I definitely would be comfortable having him. The only way that I'd maybe consider taking him in the first round is if I'm in a dynasty league. But once again, this guy's a stud. He could not have landed in a better spot. It's his job to lose. He has no real competition. The Giants have improved their offensive line a lot in the offseason. They spent a lot of money bringing guys in. And that was before the draft when they added Will Hernandez and they drafted in the second round. So that offensive line is much improved. The Giants have great weapons around him, Odell Beckham, Shepard, Ingram. So he's not going to see a lot of 8-man boxes. So when we take a look at Barkley, this is a guy that could easily hit 12,000 rushing yards and 10 TDs. That would be nothing for him. I really love this guy. He's going to have a great rookie season. So the second guy I want to look at out there is Rashad Penny, drafted by Seattle. He's out of San Diego State, 5'11", 220 pounds. Now he's going to have some competition with Chris Carson, who actually was looking really good last year, broke his leg, but all reports he'll be back and healthy, so he'll have some competition there. And Penny's a big back. He's physical. He's got deceptive speed and burst. He broke out in 2017 with 2,248 yards and 23 TDs. He really has the tools to be a number one back, so he could easily become that reliable running back that the Seahawks have been looking for ever since Marshawn Lynch left the team. The next guy I want to talk about is Sony Michel, drafted by the Patriots. He's out of Georgia, 5'11", 210. So this guy got drafted by the Patriots. I know a lot of people are pretty excited about the impact. Now, let's just talk about him a little bit here. Well, first of all, the Patriots love to spread the ball around. If you take a look at Bill Belichick, rarely does he have a bell cow in terms of running backs. That's not his MO. He likes to bring many different weapons in, many different looks and packages on offense. He's just not going to bring one guy in and give him over 300, 350 carries a year. That's just not going to happen. You have to go all the way back to Corey Dillon to really find one guy who started in that offense in terms of running backs. Now, some would say, what about LeGarrette Blount? I mean, he had a huge year a couple years ago. Now, LeGarrette Blount had a good year in terms of touchdowns, but his yardage totals weren't great. He really benefited from a good offense that got the ball in the red zone often, and he got a lot of plunges on the goal line, but he didn't have a great statistical year besides the touchdowns. Now, take a look at Sony here. He's explosive. He hits the hole hard. He shows quickness. Doesn't have great hands, but it's not going to matter anyways because in that offense, White and Rex are going to get a majority of the targets for the running backs. So my first reaction when he was drafted is like, yes, this guy's going to have a huge year. But then I kind of tempered things a little bit when I thought about Bill Belichick, his hesitant to commit to one back. And you got to remember, he's playing for a coach with high expectations. He's one missed block or one fumble away from the bench. I think he's a very nice pick. He's got a very high ceiling, okay, but you need to temper your expectations. Don't overreact with this guy. I see him going in many fantasy leagues in the 3rd round. I personally am more apt to maybe take him in the 4th round. That's kind of where my comfort zone with him right now, but I'll watch as he progresses throughout the year. Next guy I want to talk about is Nick Chubb, drafted by Cleveland. Comes out of Georgia, 5'10", 225. This is a back that I actually like. I think he landed in a real good situation here. Now, you look at Duke Johnson. Duke Johnson's going to be the 3rd down back in that team. Duke Johnson had a great year. He's got great hands, so he's going to be the 3rd down back, change of pace back. Nobody's going to unseat him from that role. But I did look at Nick here. He really projects as a 2-down type back who can wear defenses down. He can pound the ball. He's got really good size, balance, strength, vision. He's in a great situation to succeed when you consider the weapons around him. They got Jarvis Landry, David Njoku, Josh Gordon, Coleman there. He's rarely going to see 8-man boxes. So Nick Chubb is a guy that I think could have a real good rookie season. Certainly end up around 1,000 rushing yards and flirt with double-digit touchdowns. I think he landed in a pretty good opportunity to be successful there. The other guy I want to talk about is Ronald Jones, drafted by Tampa Bay out of USC, 6 foot, 200 pounds. Now, if you look at Jones, he's a little bit on the small side. Now, some backs have overcome that, like Jamal Charles and others, but those are rare cases in the NFL. Obviously, smaller backs typically have limited roles. They can handle the pounding of 20-25 carries a game. Jones is an explosive back. He's got breakaway speed. Once again, the size is a little bit of concern. The one thing that bodes well for him at this point is there's really no stud running backs ahead of him on the depth chart. Now, Barber going into that, he's going to be given the #1 job at the beginning of camp. He'll start the year as a lead back, but it's very conceivable that Jones could take that over early from him. So he's a guy to keep an eye on, although I don't project him having a huge career simply due to his size. Another guy I would look at today is Detroit drafted Kerryon Johnson about Auburn, 6 foot, 212 pounds. So Johnson landed in another, I think, a favorable situation playing for Detroit. Now, on that roster right now, he's got LeGarrette Blount ahead of him. Well, Blount's 31 years old. He's on the downside at the end of his career. And really, Blount's a one-trick pony, okay? He's a big physical back, loves to pound the ball. They also have Abdullah on there, but Abdullah is not really not the answer. He's smaller. His yards per carry dipped to a career low of 3.3 last year. He can't stay healthy. And so I think Johnson is in a really good situation. Now, if you look at him, he's a little bit on the smaller side, although he's not small per se. 212, he's not small, but he's not bigger. He's an aggressive runner with good acceleration. Now, here's how I project this. I don't think he's likely to take the starting running back position in 2018, but he's a guy that going into 2019 could very well take over that job and have a real good career there for the Lions. Another guy I want to talk about is Darius Geis, drafted by Washington out of LSU, 5'11", 218. Let's look at the competition. So who's ahead of him on the depth chart? We have Kelly. Well, Kelly's not been great. He can run hard. He can run physical. He's been beat up a lot, can't stay healthy. Not great in the passing game. And then you look at Samaje Perine. Well, Samaje Perine really underwhelmed his rookie year. He had 2 good games. Besides that, he finished with yards per carry of 3.4, so he hasn't been great. So I think that Darius lands on a really good opportunity here. Now, when you look at him, he doesn't have great hands, so he's not going to be used a lot in the passing game. It didn't matter anyways because they have Chris Thompson, who, by the way, excels in that role, so it didn't matter who you brought in. That person was never going to be out there in passing situation. His running style is very reminiscent of like an Arian Foster. Now, a lot of people anticipate that he might get drafted in the 1st round, but he dropped pretty far. And why did he drop? Well, it really concerns over off-the-field issues that caused him to drop, but he has 1st-round type talent. And so if he can keep his head on straight and everything goes well, this is a guy that could easily become the starting quarterback, be a steal for the Redskins and a steal for some of you fantasy football owners out there. Another guy we'll look at is Denver drafted Royce Freeman out of Oregon, 6 foot, 238 pounds, a big physical back. They just released C.J. Anderson, so that leaves Booker and Henderson on that team. Neither one of those guys have really shown enough to grab a hold of that job. Freeman doesn't seem to be superior in any one aspect of his game, but he's very good in all aspects of the game in terms of being a running back. So he's got all the skills to come there and not be flashy, but be a very solid, productive guy who has an opportunity becoming the starting running back there for Denver. Let me look at some other guys that are drafted out there. Well, Indianapolis drafted Hines out North Carolina State. Well, he's 5'9", 197. Not in a bad situation. There's certainly opportunity he could compete for that. He's another guy who's undersized. I think that limits his ceiling. Cincinnati drafted Mark Walton out of Miami. He's 5'9", 205. Joe Mixon's right now pegged to be their starter. He's going to get every opportunity to win that job. So Mark projects as a backup at best. Atlanta drafted Ito Smith out of Southern Mississippi, 5'9", 195. But you got Freeman and Coleman on that team. That gives him a very little chance for a lot of carries. Now, here's an interesting pick. Here's a guy that I would definitely say to keep an eye on. Here's a guy that I think fell into a decent situation. I think he's got a lot of skills, and that is Kalen Ballage, drafted by Miami out of Arizona State. He's 6'3", 230. So right now, his biggest competition is Drake. I think Drake looked really good last year when he got the opportunity to become the starting running back there, but he's far from proven at this point. Drake is going to be given an opportunity to be that guy, but he's never done it yet. Now, I don't expect Drake to falter. In fact, I'm really high on Drake. I love the guy. I think he's going to do really well, but this is definitely a situation to watch. If you take a look at Kalen, that running back, he's got nice size, decent hands. He's a little underrated. He's a guy I think could surprise a lot of people. So he's a guy I'm going to keep my eye on. He's definitely a guy that maybe to throw on your bench at the end of your draft and wait on him a couple weeks and see where he goes. Arizona drafted Chase Edmonds. I'm not even going to get into it. That's David Johnson's team, so it doesn't matter. As long as David doesn't get hurt, nobody's overtaking that. Indianapolis also drafted Jordan Wilkins out of Old Mississippi, 6'1", 217. He might surprise a few people, but he's really projected as a special teamer at this point. The Rams drafted John Kelly. That's Todd Gurley's team. No sense to even discuss that. New Orleans drafted Boston Scott. He's a smaller back, but you got Kamara, you got Ingram there, so that's another thing that we don't even need to discuss. New York Jets drafted Trenton Cannon, Virginia State, 5'11", 185. He's smaller. He projects a role very similar to Tariq Cohen on that team. David Williams was also drafted by Denver out of Arkansas, 6'1", 229. He rated really low. He's kind of a project running back, a guy who's real physical, more of a plower, lacks a high ceiling, so I don't see much initially from him. And then the other guys were drafted out there. None of them at this point look like they're in great situations, but we'll continue to monitor that situation. Our next video will give you updates regarding all of that. So let's get to the wide receivers right now. This wide receiver class was really considered weak in terms of just the quality of wide receivers. There was a lot out there. You saw that in the draft. Not many were drafted early. Another thing that we talk about wide receivers, there kind of was this rule of thumb, this idea that it took wide receivers the third year, and then in the third year they really kind of come into their own. That's been dispelled in recent years. Wide receivers have come in, and they have had a good rookie season and have had immediate impact. So let's take a look at some of the wide receivers out there and talk about some that we think maybe to keep an eye on, guys that may move into that role. So the first wide receiver to look at is drafted by the Carolina Panthers. That's DJ Moore out of Maryland. He's 6 foot, 220. His size and style of player very similar to Anquan Boldin, and he's actually in a decent position on that team there. Now, he won't be the immediate possession receivers. That's going to be Funchess. But that might actually bode well for him because as a rookie means he won't see a lot of number one corners. That'll allow him to grow in that role as a number two guy. Now, the downside for him is that Cam Newton and the offense just simply don't turn out a lot of great fancy numbers for receivers. They just simply don't do that. That's just not the way they've been. The other guy out there, and here's a guy that really should be, we should really need to keep our eye on. That's Calvin Ridley of Alabama, drafted by the Falcons. 6'1", 189, not bad height, not a big wide receiver. His size is very similar to that of Brown or Beckham. Now, he was ranked by many experts to be the most polished and complete wide receiver coming out of college. He's really in a great position on that team because we know that Julio Jones will see number one corners. He will attract a lot of attention. That'll put him in one-on-one coverage. He has an established veteran quarterback in Ryan. So Calvin Ridley is a wide receiver that certainly will have immediate impact in the NFL. I want to take a look at Denver. Denver drafted Cortland Sutton out of SMU. He has good size at 6'3". Now, a lot of people are thinking this is an indication that Demaryius Thomas is on his way out. And they cite that because of a statistical drop. They said ever since 2014 that Thomas' stats have dropped. Let's hold on for a second there. I think it's premature to assume that Sutton's going to overtake him, and here's why. Yeah, his numbers have dropped. Well, 2015, Peyton Manning had his worst season ever, okay, his entire career. And yet in that year that Peyton Manning had a horrible season, Thomas still went out and had 105 catches and 1,304 yards. The other years that he had a statistical drop, he had Brock Osweiler, quarterback, Trevor Siemian, and Lynch. So he had no good quarterback. So I think it's a little bit premature to think that Sutton's going to come in and overtake him as the #1 possession receiver there. Although he certainly has some upside, he's a guy to watch, but I think he's 2 to 3 years down the road before that happens. San Francisco drafted Dante Pettis out of Washington. He's 6'1", 189. He's got really good speed. He's a burner. The problem for me right now on the team is that Goodwin really kind of fits that role as a guy who's going to stretch the field, brings a lot of speed. And last year, Goodwin and Jimmy Garoppolo really connected, built some rapport there. Garcon will become Jimmy's kind of #1 possession guy. So right now, Pettis really kind of projects to be the #3 guy in that offense. So not a lot of stats there. The other guy I want to talk about is Christian Kirk out of Texas A&M, drafted by the Cardinals. Actually, here's a guy that I'm high on. Him and Ridley and a couple others that I'll name are guys that I think could immediately have an impact. He's 5'10", 210 pounds, but after Larry Fitzgerald, they really don't have a lot of great wide receivers on that team. He could have an immediate impact, especially with Larry taking the attention, very similar to the way Julio Jones will take the attention away from Calvin Ridley. The Bears drafted Anthony Miller out of Memphis. He's 5'11", 201. He's not going to be ahead of Allen Robinson. Obviously, Allen Robinson will be the #1 guy on that team. He could pass Gabriel with a strong preseason, but you have a rookie quarterback there, Mitch Trubisky, so I don't think Anthony Miller is going to have an immediate impact your rookie year. Pittsburgh drafted James Washington, Oklahoma State. Let's be honest, he's not going to leapfrog Juju Smith-Schuster or Brown. Plus, you look at the fact that Bell gets a lot of targets. This guy's going to be fighting for scraps in that offense. Barring an injury, he's not going to have an impact. Here's a guy that you need to keep your eye on. This guy has a lot of potential. He's very underrated, and that is the Jaguars drafted DJ Clark out of LSU. 6'3". He crushed the combine, did great there. Now, he does have Cole, Dede, Westbrook, Moncrief, and Lee ahead of him on the depth chart, but none of those wide receivers are great wide receivers, okay? And so they're far from proven and established, so he's a sleeper with a very high ceiling. Keep an eye on DJ Clark. So now we're getting to Dallas. Dallas desperately needs wide receivers. They got Allen Hurns. They got some other guys on the team. None of them are great. Dez Bryant is now gone there. Well, they drafted Michael Gallup out of Colorado State. 6'1", 205 pounds. Now, he lacks great speed. And so could he be the guy that could move into that role? I don't think so. Actually, there's a guy later on that Dallas drafted named Cedric Wilson, 6'2", out of Boise State, who honestly thinks got a better option, is going to leapfrog him on the depth chart. Those are two guys to keep an eye on, but I definitely like Cedric Wilson. Dallas has got to develop some wide receivers. They need some options there, especially with the retirement talk for Mark Witten there. Or I should say Jason Witten. Saints drafted Tre'Quan Smith. He's really kind of a project wide receiver, and they're not going to need him at this point. They got enough weapons. You look at Houston drafted wide receiver out of Texas Tech, but I'm not going to get into that. They've got Fuller, they got Hopkins there. Cleveland drafted a guy named Antonio Callaway. Actually moved up in the draft to draft this guy. It was really confusing for a lot of people. He was a problem child, had a lot of baggage, even very recently. You look at the fact he's got a lot of baggage. They also got Gordon and Landry ahead of him. He might have some talent, but I'd just stay away from this guy. I wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't get suspended his first season in the NFL. We could go down. Let's see. Denver drafted Hamilton out of Penn State. He was kind of a solid wide receiver, but he lacks playmaker ability to make a great impact. Rams drafted Jaleel Scott of New Mexico, 6'5". Jaleel Scott is someone to actually keep an eye on. 6'5". He's got a huge frame. He's big. He's physical. They don't have great wide receivers. They got Crabtree and Snead on that team. So he's a guy with a little bit of development over time. Could move into a role. I don't see that happen though his rookie season. The Buccaneers drafted Justin Watson out of Pennsylvania. He's a big receiver with excellent catching radius, so he's big, he's physical there. He tested better in the pro day than many people expected, running in the low 4.4s. He had a great split in the 10-yard. Outstanding vertical. The downside of this guy is he didn't run great routes, which is so important in the NFL. It's something he's going to have to develop. So look at this guy's got a lot of skills, got a lot of ability, but you got to work on that part of his game, so they're going to have to develop that. Really, the only bona fide receiver ahead of him is Mike Williams, or Mike Evans, I should say. Mike Evans is going to keep the #1 spot there, but Justin Watson is a project that you can keep your eyes on, move into that role. A guy that could actually have an impact his rookie year here, drafted by the Colts, is Darius Fountain of North Iowa. Half the battle for these rookies is getting into right opportunity. And if you look at T.Y. Hilton, they don't have a lot of other weapons there. So he was really an underrated talent. He wasn't invited to the combine for whatever reason, but he's got good size, he's got good speed, he's got long arms, big hands, he's raw. He's got some real explosive traits, and he's shown the potential to develop a vertical threat. So he's a guy, Darius Fountain, you might want to keep your eye on there. Another guy that they had there that the Colts drafted, keep an eye on, would be Deon Cain of Clemson. 6'2", 202 pounds. He was really good on his 3-cone time. The reason why we say that's significant is it really suggests he's a guy that can learn to get a lot of separation, which is so important with these cornerbacks in the NFL that are so fast and quick. He's got borderline top end speed, tracks deep ball as well. He's another guy that can move into that role, but probably a little bit of a project, not going to have a huge rookie season there. I could get more wide receivers, but quite honestly, these are guys we're just going to have to track as the season gets closer. None of them stand out as huge at this point. So let's get into the tight ends. So here's another position, just like quarterbacks, okay? I'm just going to tell you right up front here, you really should not consider drafting and starting a rookie tight end. Now, I know many of these guys that got drafted are very talented. I think they'll have good careers, many of them. But history and the numbers tell you that rookie tight ends simply don't come in and have great rookie seasons. They just don't. I'm going to give you some numbers. Now, part of the reason why tight ends probably don't have a big statistical impact their first year is tight ends are brought in, yes, they're used in the passing game, but they're also used highly in pass protection, picking up things like blitz packages and pickups, things like that. And I think that kind of hinders them from getting involved because they got to work out that part of their game before they can be highly involved in the passing game. I want you to consider some of the greatest tight ends I've ever played the game, and then I want you to consider the numbers they put up their rookie season, okay? Let's look at Kellen Winslow, great tight end, Hall of Famer. His rookie year, 25 catches, 225 yards, and 2 TDs. Very unspectacular. Rob Gronkowski. Now, Rob Gronkowski probably had the best rookie tight end season that I can think of right off the top of my head. Rob Gronkowski had 42 catches, 546 yards. Those aren't great numbers, but he did have 10 TDs. With that said, Rob Gronkowski is the greatest offensive tight end in the game. When you look at his stats per game breakdown compared to any other tight end in the history, we talk about in our tight end video. If you want a statistical breakdown, that go to that video, watch that. You'll hear the way we broke it down and compared him to other tight ends. Let's look at Tony Gonzalez's rookie year. 33 catches, 368 yards, and 2 TDs. Not a great rookie year, although Tony's a great tight end. Antonio Gates. Antonio Gates' rookie year had 24 catches, 389 yards, and 2 TDs. Jimmy Graham, another very, very good tight end. Rookie year, 31 catches, 356 yards, and 5 TDs. And I could go on and on and on. All these great tight ends with great careers, yet none of them had great rookie seasons. Evan Engram last year. Evan Engram was a very solid tight end, had a very good rookie season. I think he's got a great career ahead of him. Yet his numbers were just barely above average, weren't spectacular. And I think his bigger numbers were due to the fact that his wide receivers on that team were hurt. Beckham was out, Marshall was out, Shepard was hurt often, and the Giants were often playing from behind. That kind of elevated his stats. Last year was loaded with many tight ends taken in the first round who were projected and had the skills and did well at the combine to be wide receivers that could have a huge impact in the NFL, and yet none of them had great seasons in terms of fantasy football. So I know we want to get breakdown, we get excited to talk about these guys, but you would just do well just to stay away from rookie tight ends. It's just not going to convert into great seasons for you guys. So those are some of our thoughts on the draft, how it's going to affect the fantasy world. I want to hear your thoughts. We'll break this down in greater detail as the draft gets closer. Love to subscribe. Keep an eye out for some more videos we're going to put out soon. We're going to do our early wide receiver rankings, our early running back rankings, so on and so forth, and begin to really break things down. Once again, we're getting excited. Thanks for joining us. God bless and take care.